This quick video is going to show you a little bit, discuss a little bit about program goals, specifically for student services. So one of the first things we want to talk about is a little bit to understand the differences between a program goal and a service unit outcomes. So program goals or department goals, however you want to label them, they should define the overarching goals of your department. What does your department or your program hope to accomplish? Service unit outcomes are measurements that you would measure how are you serving the students or whoever your clients are. Program goals would be labeled in the sense of this is what your department will do, wants to do, plans to do, whatever. And service unit outcomes will be labeled in the sense of, or the verbiage would be something like students will be able to. So students will be able to do something as a result of receiving your service. So this particular training is going to focus on just on program goals. And we're going to do a separate training on service unit outcomes. So how do you write program goals and what are they? As you start to think about your program goals, you should be thinking about making sure that you understand what the college mission is. Take a few minutes and read it and become familiar with it. Look at the college's strategic goals and plans. What are they? Look at the college-wide priorities. What are they? Become familiar with all of these. The 6 factors for success is very relative to student services. Make sure you're familiar with those. The guided pathways, the 4 pillars, make sure you're familiar with those. And then, of course, the college equity plan, and look at the equity gaps that are shown in that plan. So as you're writing your program goals, you should be taking all these into consideration. So what should program goals look like? What should they be? Well, first of all, they should always support the college mission. They should always support your division mission and goals. They should be overarching in a sense that they're broad enough to allow multiple ways to achieve it. You don't want to have your goals so specific that it's impossible to achieve, but they should be specific enough to know so that you know when you've met that goal. They should be measurable. If you have specific steps outlined, how will you measure those? How will you know when you've achieved that goal? They should be attainable. And what that means is you don't want to write a goal that says, for example, I want to be a master chef. That may not be attainable for me over, the 2-year, 3-year cycle that we're in. They should be relevant. You want to make sure that your program goals are addressing the needs of today's students and the environment that we're in now, not something that was happening, 2-3 years ago. They should be time bound, but they can be short term. They could be midterm. They could be long-term goals. For student services, 2 to 5 program or department goals developed for each program would probably be sufficient. You should have consensus on what those program goals are, and they should have annual action plans. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. For all program goals, you're going to do some updates at the end of years 1 and 2 to kind of give an update. Where are you on these program goals? Are you making progress? What might be some of the reasons why you're not, and how are you addressing those? And then at the end of the 3-year cycle, you'd be doing a comprehensive review and report on those program goals. So I'm going to just go over a couple of examples of program goals to give you an idea of, let's write them overarching, let's make them specific, but let's make them attainable, let's make them relevant. So this is an example of a goal, and you can call program goals, department goals. In some cases, especially in student services, they're one and the same. So your program or your department, and this is an example, will engage students through the development and implementation of purposeful programs, services, and activities. So this is specific enough, but broad enough. And it gives you an opportunity to have multiple ways of meeting this goal. Now, all goals will have an action item, like what are you going to do to achieve this goal? And I want to talk a little bit about this in just a few minutes. The first thing I'm going to do is I want to give you some more examples. So the next example would be your department or program will effectively communicate with students. So this goal might not seem specific enough, but if you have, you could tailor it to your specific area or your department. And if your actions are clear, then this might be specific enough and yet broad enough. So you kind of work with this a little bit, but I want to give you an example where it may seem a little vague. Well, what does effectively communicate mean? And with students, what students? All students? Or is there a certain population? Maybe you want to define this a little bit more. Is there a certain population of students that you want to communicate with more effectively? And it might be maybe you want to reach out to, students have disengaged from the campus or who are not returning for whatever reason. Another example of a goal is your department or program will take deliberate steps to improve student engagement and connection between students, so student to student connection, and between students and staff. So this is pretty specific, but yet broad. You're going to take deliberate steps. We haven't defined those steps, but we're going to do that in the action plan. What steps are we going to take in order to improve student engagement? And we're talking about, we want to improve student engagement between students, okay, but we also want to improve student engagement between students and staff. So, you could add a timeline if you wanted to, by the end of whatever, spring 23. But this is a broad enough but specific enough goal that it could sustain throughout the whole cycle. It'd be something you want to continue to work on. The next goal example, remember, these are all examples. They could be rewritten, they could be changed. These are just some examples that, I either found or that I came up with that I think might help make it a little more clear what a program goal is. This example is your department or program, will take deliberate steps to improve student retention. And this is a really important goal. And probably all the departments and programs within student services, within instruction, with instructional support, have some goal like this. You're going to take deliberate steps to improve student retention. I mean, this is one of our campus goals, to improve student success and retention. So how will we do that? What steps will we take to meet that goal? So all goals need action plans. A goal without a plan, it's just a wish. I mean, I could say, I want to go to culinary school, become a master chef. But if I don't have a plan how to get to culinary school or what the requirements are or what it takes to become a master chef, it's just a wish. So I have to sit down and write an action plan. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of action plans that you could write for the goal examples that I gave you. So all goals have action plans. You might have 1, 2, 3, or 4 action plans. You might have more. You probably should have more than one. You should have at least 2. You may have more. So let's look at our first example goal. So our first example was your department or program will engage students through the development and implementation of purposeful programs, services, and activities. How are we going to do that? Our one action item is we're going to promote opportunities for student involvement in student organizations and volunteer services, in health and wellness activities, and student life. Another action we might take is we're going to expand leadership development programs to support active and innovative student leader communities. Action item number 3, we're going to develop diverse and inclusive communities on campus. So did I come up with these on my own? No, I did some research. I looked at how different areas and different campuses are writing their student services program goals. I came up with some action items based on some of the information I read and some examples I found online. So, you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. Think about what you want to achieve, and then let's, sit down and work through it a little bit. And you don't have to work through it alone. You have your whole department. It should be, a collaborative process. And of course, you have other people on faculty, including myself, to help you. Our next example we had was our department or program will effectively communicate with students. How are we going to do that? First action item is we're going to increase and enhance the visibility of programs, services, facilities, and activities. Okay. Action item number 2, we're going to increase and enhance methods of reaching students. And action item number 3, we're going to increase and enhance the use of technology to support students. So we've come up with 3 action items that will help us effectively communicate with students. These are, various ways that will help us communicate or effectively communicate with students. So we're not going to say we're going to increase communication. We're going to do that down here. What is our goal to be effective in communicating with students? Let's look at our next example. So this example, we said our department or program will enhance outreach to re-engage students, basically meet students where they are. Okay. And this is really a campus-wide goal for the next year, re-engaging students. So how are you going to re-engage students? What actions will you take? Action item number 1, we're going to increase methods and number of contacts to disengage students. Action item number 2, provide support services in various locations across campus and in the community. Rather than staying in our own office and our own little space, let's reach out. Let's try to re-engage students where they are, meet students where they are. And action item number 3, promote support services on various social media platforms. So these are various ways where we can attempt to re-engage students. I'm sure that, the areas in student services that are in voluntary engagement have many more ideas and things that they would like to implement in order to re-engage students. This is just some examples, a few simple examples. Okay, another goal that we had was we will take deliberate steps to improve student retention. Okay, well, what are those deliberate steps? Action item number 1, we're going to set up automatic emails that trigger at particular points in the semester, like maybe before the midterm, maybe before the final, that would identify whatever support services are available to students that would help them stay on campus and stay engaged and improve their retention. Action number 2, we're going to use technology to identify those at-risk students. Who are they? And how does Miramar define at-risk? What is an at-risk student? So first we need to define it, and then we need to use technology to identify who they are. And then action item number 3, we're going to increase the methods and number of communications to DEI or disproportionately impacted populations. So there we've set 3 actions that we can work on over the next year or so to improve student retention. So now it's your turn. So create 1 program goal and 2 action items. Now remember, program goals are not about the students. They're about what your department will do or wants to do or hopes to achieve. Outcomes, remember, they're student-centered. Goals are department or focus-centered. Let me know if you have any questions.